We are here with a Halloween-themed set of picks for Week 9 of the NFL season. What is Halloween-themed about it? Absolutely nothing besides this stupid hat I am wearing. Having said that, we've got a great slate of games ahead of us. Phenomenal stuff across the board. Let's get right into it. Starting things off, Cowboys versus the Falcons. And we all know how this game's going to turn out. We know who Dak Prescott and the Cowboys offense are at this point in the year. Dak is doing everything in his power to shove that ball into CeeDee Lamb's hands and let him do something in space to try and generate an offense. It's not happening. This is a rebuild year for Dallas. They need to embrace that. They need to sell at the deadline, and they need to buckle up for a nice, hot, crispy L at the hands of the Atlanta Falcons. Their defense cannot stop the run, can barely stop the pass, going to be victimized by the Falcons offense and Kirk Cousins at 1 p.m. CeeDee Lamb is going to get bracketed all day by those elite players in the Falcons secondary, and is just not going to be able to get it going enough to change this game. The only possible path to victory the Cowboys have is if Micah Parsons comes back and sacks Kirk Cousins on every single one of his dropbacks, and even then, that might not be enough. Give me the Falcons going away with this one.
I agree. The Cowboys' offense is deeply flawed. CeeDee Lamb is very good. Dak Prescott is a solid quarterback, but with no run game, offensive line that's shakier than it's been in years past, they don't really have the ability to just put up 35, 40 points on every single team they play, and sometimes 30 points is just not good enough with how bad this Cowboys defense is. The only defense in the NFL that is giving up more points per game than the Cowboys is the Carolina Panthers, who before the podcast, you told me what, Isaiah?
I told you they had the worst point differential. I implied they had the worst point differential of any team ever at this point in the year, but
bad defense.
Feeling
all
good about
around.
them this week. I'm feeling good about them this week.
And the fact the Cowboys defense is in that conversation, even if Micah Parsons steps back on the field for them, they're playing an offense that has two very capable running backs. They have weapons to throw the ball to, and they have Kirk Cousins at quarterback. So the Falcons offense is going to be able to put up more points than the Cowboys offense will, and I don't expect the Cowboys to be able to win one away, and their record's going to get even worse as they look towards having a top 10 pick.
What, a Darnell Mooney, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts not get the respect of having a name drop from that side of the room? Come now, we know the weapons on the Falcons side of the ball. We agree, no need to drone on to it. About a game I am excited to predict, though, is the Broncos taking on the Ravens, because I can finally pick against the Broncos confidently and know they are going to lose. And a lot is being made of the Ravens having what some are calling the worst passing defense in football because they've given up the most yards. Frankly, that's not the case. When you look at their defense, you compare the first half to the second half. They are giving up about the same number of passing yards per game as the Chicago Bears defense in the first half. They are playing good, concise, consistent football in the first half when other teams are forced to run their offense and try to get something going on the ground. Once the second half starts, they really start getting gouged. They become one of the worst passing defenses ever. That is in large part due to the fact the Ravens are playing soft man and generally have enough of a lead they can afford to get conservative in the second half. That has skewed the numbers somewhat. Have there been games like against the Browns last week, against the Bengals, where they get lit up? Yes. But they also dropped 3 interceptions against the Browns. I just don't see that happening again, particularly that Kyle Hamilton one. That was atrocious from a former first-team All-Pro player. Their defense is not as bad as it is being attributed to. They're going to play very well against the Broncos and their receiving core, which is devoid of talent. Offensively, this is probably going to be Lamar's biggest test of the season against this Broncos front seven, against Zach Allen, one of the best defensive tackles in football, quietly having a first-team All-Pro season. Be a little bit louder if he was in a bigger market, but great performance from him. I think it's going to be a competitive, low-scoring game. The line on this game being -9 for the Ravens is a little bit ridiculous for me. I think their offense is too good in its totality to lose, but I don't think it's going to be some blowout victory where they just shellac the Broncos. Good competitive game. Give me the Ravens at home.
This game is going to be close, and I think the reason why the Ravens defense being bad has been a little bit overblown, because against the run, they have been phenomenal this year. They are the best team in the NFL against the run this season. And I think there is real potential for Bo Nix to have success against this Ravens team. He's had some highs this season and some very low lows. We do know that. He's not been the most consistent rookie quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but when you have quarterbacks like Gardner Minshew and Jameis Winston beating this Ravens secondary up, Bo Nix can do that with Sean Payton calling plays. So there is the potential for the Broncos to put up points. Why I would still pick the Ravens to win is because Lamar Jackson is having a historic season. He's on pace for a stat line better than his 2019 year, which is crazy to think about. And the only reason the Ravens have not dominated in the same way they did in 2019 when Lamar was on that tear is because of their defense. So I think their offense is just too much for the Broncos offense to keep up with, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bo Nix has a very solid game.
They scored 23 points against the Raiders. I think that's got a lot more to do with them losing that game than Gardner Minshew saucing up the secondary. But I got the Ravens winning this one. We don't need to get down to the minutia. Their defense is not as bad as Ravens fans desperate to make excuses for Lamar would like you to believe. Also, getting Deontay Johnson, they needed a good wide receiver too. Bateman could barely get open against man, and when he did, he'd often drop the ball. Having someone like Johnson who can win in contested catches, can make vertical plays, really does open up that offense. That is a deep, talented offense, which now looks like the best in football. On to the Bills taking on the Dolphins, and another one of the offenses in football you could argue is the best. And I like Tua. I like the Dolphins. McDaniel, there's not really much he can do with how bad his defense has been banged up, torn apart by injuries and free agency. It really is a pitiable position to be in. Tua's talking about a little bit of heat, a little bit of pepper in the press conferences, pushing back on the fans, attributing the Dolphins' failures to him not being able to field a snap and it resulting in a safety. I like that version of Tua. I like the version of Tua which tells the fans to shut up when they tell him to wear a Guardian cap. That version of Tua, while likely to get a concussion, has a bit more juice in his arm. Having said those nice things, Bills are running away with this one. Their offense is too deep. Keon Coleman is emerging as a wide receiver one. And while we only saw Amari Cooper put up 3 yards last week, I think that changes against this depleted Dolphins defense. I think he goes for a crispy 85 yards, 6-7 catches, maybe a little touchdown in there. A true fantasy darling performance.
I hope so, because I traded for him in a dynasty league. And if you, speaking of fantasy, if you own any Dolphins players, you were really excited last week with Tua back on the field with the numbers Devon Achane put up. Tyreek Hill had a solid game. Jalen Waddle at least wasn't a complete loss, and Raheem Mostert got in the end zone a couple times. But that is just fantasy football, and at this point, this Dolphins team under Mike McDaniel is kind of a gimmick at this point. Their defense is atrocious. They're not really stopping anyone. In big moments, this Dolphins team does not really show up, and they're playing a Bills team that is, outside of 2 games this season, has been extremely good, especially at home. Given the fact the game is in Buffalo and Josh Allen has been rolling, I fully expect the Bills to still win this one.
This feels like the season Josh Allen finally gets over the hump and wins the MVP. A big part of that is going to be his win-loss record, and I just don't see him falling to 6-3 this week. The Bills are going to be 7-2. They're going to beat the Dolphins. Not much more to go over with that one.
And they've only lost on the road to playoff teams this year.
You'd still like some of it. You'd like him to look better against Baltimore at least. Getting shellacked by the Ravens in Baltimore, not a good look, does not bode well for the playoffs. So at this rate, the Ravens losing games, they may not have home field advantage even for the second round. On to the Saints versus the Panthers. I mean, what do you want me to say about this one?
You ever want me to go first?
Not really. When I talk about the Panthers so desperately, I just lead you into this absolute dud of a game. I was literally going to flip a coin this week and decide who was going to win. But that was when Jake Hayner was scheduled to play quarterback. Carr's coming back. No matter how much I criticize him, his presence in the locker room, his moody sulking on the sideline, his inability to rise to the biggest occasion, he's still better than Bryce Young at this point in his career. The Saints offense is still deeper and more talented, and the Panthers have now traded away Deontay Johnson, their best receiver. The only hope this offense has is if Xavier Legette has a breakout game in the absence of Johnson. Sometimes get a wide receiver out the team is a bit of a problem. It elevates the whole organization. I don't see that happening. Saints have a better defense. They got a better offensive line. They've got better weapons. They got a better quarterback. They've got a worse coach, they got a comparably bad coach, but what are you going to do? I think they finally break their losing streak and get one off against Carolina.
And speaking of losing streaks, the Panthers have won a football game more recently than the New Orleans Saints have, who started the year extremely hot, and over this 6-game losing streak, their offense has been flat out bad. Granted, Spencer Rattler has been their quarterback for 3 of them, and they're averaging 15 points a game with Spencer Rattler throwing passes. But with Derek Carr on the field, it gives them an advantage that the Panthers just don't have. Bryce Young has still been very bad, even returning due to Andy Dalton's injury, still playing this week. I don't expect him to magically all of a sudden become a good NFL starting quarterback in Carolina. And Derek Carr hopefully, for the people that have him in fantasy, actually throws Chris Olave the ball now that Rashid Shaheed is not on the field and he could get some targets. So for my fantasy team, hoping he gets the ball, but either way, I'm predicting the Saints to win.
Two things. One, Rashid Shaheed. I struggle with it too. Second, that is our second mention of fantasy football this week. No more. We are a NFL show.
Tell me what to do.
Us big brain people who love football don't talk about fantasy all that often. We must be better. Speaking of fantasy, though, there's this great
Use code Thicc on Underdog. They have best ball tournaments every single week. Do pick'ems. Code Thicc. Get bonus cash up to $1,000. Back to the predictions.
Oh, God, look at this stinker here. Raiders versus the Bengals. Ew. This is going to be an ugly game, man. 4 straight losses is about to become 5 for Las Vegas. You just cannot see this game turning out well for them. Even if you think the removal of Davante Adams is somehow net positive in your mind, that locker room is chaotic. Pierce is losing the team. Crosby is not performing like the defensive player of the year candidate we expected him to. And Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are barbecuing this sorry defense. Even if the Bengals can't run the ball, they're a one-dimensional team. That dimension is enough to trounce a Vegas team in absolute freefall. This is a bad game. I don't think I'm going to be seeing much of it outside of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins touchdowns on NFL Red Zone. Give me the Bengals.
Yeah, the Bengals, they're not a phenomenal team. They're not an elite team, but they're also not a bad team. They're just kind of an average. They're a team in the NFL at this point. They're 1 point away from beating the Chiefs. They're even closer to beating the Ravens. They're this close to being 5-3 instead of 3-5.
1 point away from beating the Chiefs means absolutely nothing, man. The Raiders are 1 touchdown away from beating the Chiefs this year. It doesn't matter. That's how the Chiefs are. That's not some measuring stick.
Point being, this Bengals team is not, I feel like a lot of people have been saying it, but they're not as bad as their record. The Raiders, on the other hand, without Davante Adams, whatever they got going on at quarterback, whatever they have going on in the back, whatever they have going on defense, the only thing exciting about their organization is that Brock Bowers is having a historic rookie tight end season. So I fully expect in Cincinnati, the Bengals offense to put on a show.
The only thing exciting about their organization is they're in Vegas. So you're going to have a lovely media cycle of DUIs coming out of that team ad infinitum. The only thing exciting about this team is you can go play some blackjack once you're done watching them get embarrassed in their Death Star of a stadium. Not much more needs to be said. Chargers, Browns. This is where people start having a bit too much faith in Cleveland. They think, oh, Jameis is back. He's here. He's going to throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns again. He's got the defense fired up. The Chargers are a bucket of cold water to a lot of NFL teams. You may beat them, but they're going to slow you down, cool you off, ruin your momentum going forward, and generally just be a thorn in your side. I don't care how banged up LA is. With Justin Herbert, with Dobbins, with Gus, with the right side of that offensive line getting back in shape, they're going to be able to move the ball somewhat effectively, keep it low scoring on the ground. Time of possession is going to be a big factor. They're going to get 20, 23 points against this Browns defense. You look at last week's performance against the Ravens for Cleveland, not that good once you really get into it. 3 dropped interceptions, shouldn't have beat them. If Bateman catches the ball, hits him in the chest, or Flowers catches one of his drops, the Ravens still win that game. Not a special performance. A little bit of that momentum is going to have worn off now that quarterback change is set in stone, and we're seeing another week of Jameis in practice, and I'm just not sold. I'm not a Browns believer. I am a Herbert believer. I am a Harbaugh disciple, and I am choosing to roll forward with faith that they're going to get to 5-3.
I know it's not very long ago in our Week 8 reactions, I said this Browns team could beat the Chargers, and this version of the Browns, they're going to give the Chargers a little bit of a run for their money, but I do agree with Isaiah that because of the strength of this Chargers defense, they've been dominant all season long. They're going to win due to the strength of that, and their offense has been getting healthier. Their offensive line is completely healthy. They have Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt. They're getting healthier every single week. Justin Herbert has been playing at a high level, so I don't think this not extremely talented Browns offense is going to be able to put up enough points against this Chargers defense. I mean, Cedric Wilson, Jerry Jeudy, Nick Chubb, who is still kind of getting back into the groove after his knee injury last season. the Chargers are going to win.
Is Joey Bosa playing this week, or do you know?
I believe he's playing.
Because election week, Joey Bosa, I know Nick Bosa gets most of the talk. You know that man thinks pretty much the same way as his brother. Jameis, you are in danger, pal. I hope the left side of that offensive line, Jedrick Willis, can hold up to what you are about to experience. It's going to be rough for J-Mo, to be sure. Would you like to do the Commanders-Giants? I'd like to point out before you do it, though, the Giants are only 4-point underdogs in this one.
The Giants...
4-point under. How does that happen? I need someone to explain that to me.
I don't have much faith the Giants can make this game close. They bamboozled us for about half the game last week that they could maybe win it. I mean, the back and forth field goals, 9-9, and then the Steelers offense kind of ran away with it late in the game. Brian Dable is doing his most, putting 12 men on the field, trying to get the ball back, and then Daniel Jones throws a game-losing interception. This offense just does not have enough talent with Andrew Thomas not on the field. Daniel Jones does not make decisions quick enough. And then on the other side of the field, you have a defense, while not extremely talented, is going to make stops here and there and give the ball back to their offense that is extremely good. If the Steelers with Najee Harris and Russell Wilson can put up the rushing performance that they did, Brian Robinson, Jaden Daniels are going to do that tenfold, and they have a better passing attack. So I expect this to not be a particularly close game.
A defense which will make stops here and there. Tristan, the Commanders' defense isn't bad. They held the Bears to 15 points last week. They had arguably the best defensive performance against the Ravens team we have seen all year, besides the Chiefs, of course. They're not bad. The defense is going to handle the Giants. This one's at MetLife, so hopefully Jaden Daniels and all the other Commander stars can stay healthy.
Is the Commanders' defense better or worse than the Steelers' defense?
I don't know. Hard to say. The way they've been playing recently, I'd say they've been better. In totality, I'd say they'd be worse. On paper, they're worse. But the past few weeks make me want to say they're better. They're playing very good.
They're average to above average, but I'm not putting them in that top 10. Point being, it's enough to beat this Giants offense.
What isn't enough to beat this Giants offense? Also, you owe me an apology for saying I was a hater for telling you Devin Singletary wasn't good. He is actually back to Devin Singletary now.
It's just I was right about Tyrone Tracy.
I was right about a wide receiver. Congratulations.
Running back.
Singletary stinks. Anyway, Patriots at the Titans. Here comes win number 2 for the Tennessee Titans. Both these teams are bad. Both these offenses aren't functional. Drake may not play due to a concussion. Even if he does, I would be hesitant to send a young quarterback with brain damage out to face this Titans defense, which is still statistically among the best in football. The only good unit on either of these two teams, I guess the Patriots special teams isn't too bad when I get right down to it. The only good unit is the Titans defense. I think that's enough to completely stymie the Patriots offense. I think whether it be Mason Rudolph or Will Levis, who is back this week and healthy, they'll be able to do just enough against a Patriots defense, which has wilted since Jabril Peppers went out, and they're going to get win number 2 of the season.
The Titans have already been waving the white flag. They shipped DeAndre Hopkins off to the Chiefs, and against this Patriots team, if Drake May's playing, I think it's going to be a blowout. If he's not playing, the Titans are one of the worst teams in football, right next to the Panthers. This Patriots team, no one expected it heading into the season, but they do things competently here and there. They're not a good team by any stretch of the imagination.
They got one more win than the Titans.
That's more competent than the Titans.
Not after this week, it won't be. Also, I think comparing any team to the Panthers is a bit of a misnomer. They're so bad. If the Titans team played the Panthers, I think they'd win by 2 scores. They're that bad.
You think they'd win, but they have the same
record.
They
haven't played, as a matter of fact, so I can't say for sure they'd win. I'm not God. I can't randomly change the NFL schedules and say, actually, in week 5 when they played, I think they'd win.
They don't play, and they're a very bad team, one of the 2 worst teams in the NFL.
They might be playing number 3.
The Patriots are a slightly better team than the Titans, and they're going to go into Tennessee and win that game.
I think it's going to be really funny if the Titans scrape their way to 5 or 6 wins. That would be amusing to me. You look at the bottom of the draft last year, there are not too many teams with 2 wins. And Tennessee's defense, at the very least, precludes them from being an absolute bottom of the barrel, bottom feeder. So I don't know. I'm optimistic, but I will let you go first.
It hasn't precluded them from being a bottom feeder yet.
So far, we have plenty of time. Bears versus the Cardinals. You got this one because I'm going the opposite of whoever you pick.
The Bears-Cardinals, you kind of alluded to it already. This is maybe the toughest game to predict of week 9 so far that we've talked about, the Cardinals, they're just a weird football team. They've had some great performances this year. They've won a couple games by just 1 point, narrowly eking out a victory. The 49ers beat the Chargers by 2, Dolphins by 1. They blew out the Rams. They got blown out by the Commanders. So you don't really know which Cardinals team is going to show up every single week. Their defense is not super talented, but it is well run with Jonathan Gannon calling plays. And then their offense, will Kyler Murray get Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride the ball? You don't know on a week-to-week basis. And then on the Bears side of things, their defense is extremely good, but you don't know which Caleb Williams is going to show up every week, and you don't know what kind of offense is going to be called every week from a play-calling perspective. So because the Bears defense is so good, and it's not like the Cardinals defense has really wowed any of us, I do think the Bears are going to win, but it will not shock me if the Cardinals get a victory at home.
Yeah, well, you're wrong about, the Cardinals defense isn't that good. Kept Tua and company under 30. They kept the Chargers to, 15? They've had back-to-back game-winning field goals. The defense is shaping up. You saw this a few years ago with Brian Flores, his first year in Minnesota. They started off really bad, but as they've gotten used to Gannon's scheme, you kind of see it is improving over time. This is going to be a competent defense. Fringe top 10 by the end of the year in terms of just a game-to-game basis. Obviously, the totality of the stats not going to be in their favor, but I think they give Caleb Williams real trouble. They're not going to be sending a ton of pressure at him unless they dial up a few exotic blitzes, which is unlikely to happen, but 8 guys back in coverage is going to lead to bad errant throws, balls in windows where they really shouldn't be throwing, an interception, maybe 2. Offensively, I think the Cardinals can do just enough on the ground to churn the ball, keep things rolling, and generally allow themselves to be in this game. And as we have seen from Jaden Daniels, this Bears team is susceptible to getting Hail Married. And what is Kyler Murray's most well-known play in his entire NFL career? A Hail Mary to DeAndre Hopkins. So if it really comes down to it, I think we see a Kyler Murray Hail Mary to Marvin Harrison Jr. to win Arizona the game. But the Cardinals are pulling away with this one. They got it.
Back-to-back losses on a Hail Mary would be devastating.
Stranger things have happened. Speaking of stranger things, Doug Pearson still has his job.
And the Jaguars are heading to Philadelphia. I mentioned a team waving a white flag earlier in this video, and the Jaguars certainly are signaling that they're giving up on the season when they traded Cam Robinson to the Minnesota Vikings, and their team is completely destroyed by injuries. Christian Kirk, done for the year. Brian Thomas, it sounds like I think he's going to play this week, but is dealing with a chest injury. Gabe Davis, dealing with an injury. Etienne, coming off a hamstring injury if he plays. Bigsby, I think he's banged up with an ankle injury, I want to say. I know he's listed as questionable, but regardless, this is a team that is playing bad. They have one of the 5 worst defenses in the NFL. They get the ball thrown all over them, and they're playing an Eagles team that is finally getting in the swing of things themselves. With A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith back in the lineup, they're committed more to running the ball. They're not letting Jalen Hurts throw the ball 30 times a game, and they're using Saquon Barkley. They're getting a couple big plays from their receivers, and they finally are starting to look like more of a cohesive unit on offense like we expected them to look like at the beginning of the season. So the Eagles should win in blowout fashion.
I mean, the interesting angle of this game is Brian Thomas's potential Offensive Rookie of the Year campaign. Obviously, that is going to be an issue given you've got a Jaden Daniels situation, but we could be looking at Puka versus C.J. Stroud part 2. Thomas has been great, the best rookie wide receiver so far. I think they may try and force feed him the ball, particularly since Christian Kirk is out. See that Quinyon Mitchell matchup, a potential defensive rookie of the year candidate, squaring off against the offensive rookie of the year candidate. Very interesting stuff going on. Eagles offense is too deep. Their passing attack, as bad as it has been, should be able to pick apart this sorry Jaguar secondary. Saquon is going to have free dominion as long as he stays within the tackles, where the Eagles are their strongest. Eagles are winning this one. Not much more needs to be said. And look, I don't think much more needs to be said about the Lions playing the Packers. But you're going to try and drum up some narrative, some type of competition behind this game. So go ahead, lie to people.
I'm a fan of the players the Packers have and how they have constructed their roster.
That's diplomatic.
If you were going to make an argument for as to why the Packers are going to win, the game is in Lambeau Field. The weather is not going to be all that great, and that favors the Packers. They're at home. Jared Goff, on the road in poor weather, he's not necessarily been the best. He's much better in a dome or in warm weather climates.
God forbid the Lions have to run the ball.
Let me finish. But with that being said, the Lions have a run game, one of the best in the NFL, and it was absolutely electric the past 2 weeks, where Jahmyr Gibbs went for, I think it was around 115, 127, juking out defenders, breaking big runs, dominating, imposing his will on defenses. So the Lions have the run game, they have the offensive line to go into Lambeau Field, control the game on the ground, and at that point, Jared Goff just needs to not make mistakes, get the ball out to his very good weapons in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe Sam Laporta finally starts to have the season he had last year, and the Lions should win. It also hurts the Packers that Jordan Love, if he plays, immobile. If he doesn't play, will Malik Willis in Game 4, now that teams have more film on him, be as productive as he's been against a great Lions team?
Well, I'd start Malik Willis the rest of the year if he pulled off a win against this Lions team, making him 3-0 as a starter and the savior of that game against the Jaguars. Came in, stepped up, and did what Love couldn't and put the nail in the kiddie's coffin. Having said that, the area of intrigue for me, the left side of the Packers offensive line, not particularly special. The Lions' edge play has not been good since Hutch went down. Their sacks, pressures, all that stuff fell off a cliff once the Defensive Player of the Year candidate exited the lineup. If they can give Love time in the pocket, if he winds up playing, I think he can exploit this Lions secondary, which still is not that good, but I don't think it's going to happen. You mentioned the weather in some way, which might affect Jared Goff. We have seen the Lions win a game last week where Jared Goff attempted 8 pass attempts. They are good without him. They do not need Jared Goff in order to win. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is more than enough to beat this Packers team, this sorry Packers front seven. Give me the Lions on the road, maintaining control of the NFC North.
I wouldn't use sorry as a word to describe anything on the Packers.
I would say the front seven's pretty sorry. They're getting carried by a lot of interceptions on the back end from phenomenal players like Xavier McKinney. Once he got that dark blue off, by the way, he became Ed Reed, and Jair Alexander. If we want to be realistic about their defense, let's be realistic about it. If you want to talk about Xavier McKinney, let's talk about him.
If you want to talk about sorry, we could talk about the Seattle Seahawks because they have blown extremely hot and cold over the previous 3 weeks. The 49ers beat them handily. They made quick work of the Falcons, and then the Bills made them look completely incompetent. So they're going against a Rams team that last week was extremely impressive against a great Vikings defense. This Rams team is just a different team with Puka Nacua on the field. Cooper Kupp working off of that now that he's back from that ankle injury, and they are going to take it to the Seahawks. The 12th man, that advantage is a thing of the past. Their offense is not as good as you would like it to be with all the talent that they have. DK Metcalf now dealing with an injury. The run game didn't even show up last week. So I think the Rams, with the momentum of that Vikings win, Puka Nacua really getting back on the field and dominating, is going to beat the Seahawks team.
I mean, you once again are comparing apples to oranges here. Oh, the 12th man isn't a thing anymore. There are too many Bills fans in the stadium. The Bills are one of the most dedicated fan bases in football. They travel anywhere. When's the last time
I didn't make any comparison.
When's the last time you have seen a Rams fan? The 12th man is still a thing because no one besides Seahawks fans is buying tickets to that game, because no one besides Seahawks fans cares about that game, because there is no such thing as Rams fans. The 12th man is going to be a part of this game. Maybe not a large part, but it's going to be there. I tend to agree with you, though. The Rams, when they have Nacua, when they have Kupp, are the better team. Their offense is too balanced. Their rushing attack, pretty real now that offensive line started getting back and fully healthy. Having Blake Corum there to alleviate some pressure from Kyron Williams, go in there on pass plays, put some meaningful blocks down, keep Williams healthy, in shape, fresh, ready to go. That helps a lot. The Seahawks, I'm not sold on. I've never been sold on. Aside from Charles Cross, that offensive line is the worst in football. And how the Rams front seven has performed, at least last week in the absence of Darisaw, was enough to move me a little bit. I was a little moved by that. Their defense in general is still not good. They can still get bullied by DK Metcalf on the outside. But hey, most teams can be. I'm going with the Rams, but I am using the ever-elusive mulligan on this one. You're going to have to follow me here because it's pretty, no, you're going to appreciate this one. I think it would be really effing funny in a dark way if the one game of year Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp were fully healthy was for the Vikings. So if both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp go down this game and the Vikings are the only team to face them for an entire game healthy, I've got the Seahawks pulling off a win. Which, otherwise, I've got the Rams. There's the mulligan. specific enough for you? 2-star players getting injured, is that good enough for you?
If the Vikings next week, if Justin Jefferson and everyone get hurt, then they're not. Then the Colts are going. Like, we could do this with any team. If
I'm naming 2 specific star players. If Williams goes down and Kupp goes down, it doesn't hit. If Puka Nacua goes down and Stafford goes down, it doesn't hit. It's 2 players. You are being a hateful little troglodyte whose brain struggles to keep up with mine. Speaking of struggling to keep up,
if Jaden Daniels goes down, the Giants can win.
Struggling to go. You mean you want to make that your mulligan of the week?
No, I don't. I don't use mulligans because I'm not a soft and weak man.
Speaking of soft and weak men, Anthony Richardson has been benched. And here comes some more complaining about the Vikings. If the Vikings had played this Colts team on Thursday Night Football of last week, they would have got to face the quarterback in the league who is the most susceptible to the blitz, has an 18% success rate when blitzed. Instead, they're getting Joe Flacco. If they got to face the Rams this Sunday, they would have had a little bit of film and notice that, hey, 2-star receivers are coming at us instead of a misleading injury report. They could pretty easily be 7-1 at this point if those were reversed. I digress, though. Flacco is a completely different animal than Anthony Richardson. He's going to stand up to the blitz better. Maybe not great, but better. The Colts O-line, very good. Not quite on the same level as Detroit, but you assume with quality blocking backs like Jonathan Taylor in there, they're going to be able to pick up the blitz all right, which means the Vikings cornerbacks and secondary are going to have a long day in man coverage against Alec Pierce, Pittman, Downs, all those quality receivers. Josh Jacobs should be relatively stymied in the first half, but once he starts wearing down that front 7, he's really going to get going. The only hope of slowing him down is if Cashman comes back, which he is scheduled to do, and gives them a dynamic linebacking tandem. Having said that, the Colts defense is terrible. They've been terrible all year. Their only really good performances were against Caleb Williams, who has his own intricate set of issues. The Vikings offense should be able to have free reign against this team, even in the absence of Darius. Replacing him with Cam Robinson is definitely a downgrade. It's not as bad as it would be if Quessenberry was still starting at tackle, but they should be able to move the ball up and down the field. No one on that team, no 2 people on that team can cover Justin Jefferson for prolonged periods of time. Their pass rush isn't getting home. Darnold is going to be able to air that sucker out. Jones is going to find rushing lanes on that right side of the line, and Hockenson is finally back in the lineup. There is no way to me the Colts win this game. If they do, however, we officially enter panic mode on the Viking season. I got Minnesota winning, but
it feels like some people have entered, I'm not saying you are, it feels like some people have kind of entered panic mode with the Vikings a little bit. They're like, this is the same Vikings we've seen in previous seasons where they look extremely good and then they lose some games and then they fall completely apart. But I don't think this is the same Vikings team of years past. They're getting TJ Hockenson back. They still have a whole lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. They're bringing Cam Robinson into the building. It is an extremely well-coached team. And Brian Flores, I know their defense has had some down weeks, but this week against the Colts team, I think they're going to turn over a new leaf, so to speak. Their defense is going to get back going. They're going to blitz Joe Flacco more. They're going to pick up a few sacks, and I think the defense will do enough to win, especially with how good I think the offense is going to be.
Flacco's throwing for 450 just because you said that. You have doomed my Minnesota Vikings once again. The reason the fans are abandoning all hope is because they're a bunch of pessimistic losers with weak mentalities. The true Vikings fans persist. We believe. We say they're going to win every game even though they're really not to. Now, the Buccaneers-Chiefs game has an interesting angle for me. You remember last week you talked about, well, Sterling Shepard's got name value recognition. He's a well-known player. He's in the Giants. Sterling Shepard now isn't going to play. He's got a hamstring injury, which means former teammate of Isaiah Ashley at Furman University and converted tight end Ryan Miller has entered the rotation for the Buccaneers. He is, I think, their 3rd or their 4th wide receiver now, which adds an interesting angle to things because we at the Thicc Menning program always pick for our friends of the program to win. Having said that, there's just something about the Kansas City Chiefs with DeAndre Hopkins, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, Creed Humphrey, their elite defense, Andy Reid, and the powers that be, aka the NFL officials, playing against Baker Mayfield and Ryan Miller, which is making me a bit hesitant to pick the Buccaneers to win. I just can't put my finger on it, but there's something out there which is telling me ease up a little bit on that prediction next week, Tiger. So, reluctantly, tentatively, I'm going to go with a 23-17 victory for the Kansas City Chiefs. But if Ryan Miller and the Buccaneers company pull off the impossible and hand the Chiefs their first loss of the season, we will be celebrating.
Well, the Buccaneers, they have shown since losing Mike Evans and Chris Godwin that they can move the ball. Cade Otton last week, 9 catches, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a great game. Bucky Irvin, Rashad White got going. The concerning thing about this Buccaneers offense without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin is that Baker Mayfield is turning the ball over more. And when you're playing the Chiefs in Kansas City, the hardest environment to play in the NFL, and you're missing your top 2 receivers, your quarterback is turning the ball over, that's going to cause some problems. The Chiefs are going to get to 8-0. I think we're going to see DeAndre Hopkins more involved in the offense this week. Chiefs are winning.
A bold take to be sure. They're going to throw more to the guy they traded for. It is slightly interesting to note that historically, the team who stays undefeated the longest does not win the Super Bowl. That goes back well past the undefeated Brady Patriots. There's just something about they fall apart down the stretch. Perhaps the Chiefs' defense has peaked early. Perhaps they're going to do what the Vikings' defense has done in recent weeks, just kind of slow down, get picked apart down the stretch. Perhaps Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen finally has it in them this year. We can only hope. Anyway, roll the outro and the second underdog promo.
That has been our Week 9 predictions. Let us know your predictions down in the comments below. If you get more than Isaiah right, he'll send you $100. Like the video, subscribe, use code Thicc on Underdog, gets you bonus cash up to $1,000, and we'll see you in the next one.